Hello and welcome to Making Media Now, the Filmmakers Collaborative podcast. I'm your host, Michael Azevedo. On this episode, we're proud to introduce to the world a new filmmaking and multi-platform initiative for which Filmmakers Collaborative is the fiscal sponsor. The initiative is called Brainstorm the Film, and I'm joined by Bonnie Waltch and Sara Schley, the producing team behind this comprehensive and far-reaching project. Currently in the development phase, Brainstorm the Film, inspired by the book Brainstorm, Sara Schley's searing memoir of life on the bipolar spectrum, is an unprecedented initiative that combines inspiring stories of people with lived experience of being on the bipolar spectrum, cutting-edge science, and breakthrough treatments in one coherent narrative. Here's an initial trailer summarizing the project's objectives.
Over 50 million people are living with debilitating depression today. Yet millions are misdiagnosed. 1 out of 3 people diagnosed with depression actually have a form of bipolar. Their brains are on the bipolar spectrum. But most people have never heard of the bipolar spectrum, including practitioners who are prescribing the wrong medications. The wrong diagnosis can be deadly. People with bipolar brains are twice as likely to die by suicide as people with major depression. In the 11 years on average it takes to get a correct diagnosis and treatment, people are suffering and dying. They are our family and friends. But we have the power to change this. Through striking personal stories, cutting-edge brain science, and breakthrough therapies, Brainstorm the Film will save lives.
On Wednesday, February 8th, from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Filmmakers Collaborative will be hosting a free Zoom event featuring members of the producing team, along with key advisors and participants. This event will serve as a wonderful opportunity to learn about the goals of the film and its outreach efforts, while also giving attendees an opportunity to pose questions about the project and about life on the bipolar spectrum. And as importantly, the event will serve as an invitation to attendees to contribute what they can to ensure the project's success. For more information about the February 8th Zoom event, please visit Filmmakers Collaborative at www.filmmakerscollab.org. And now on to my conversation with Bonnie Waltch and Sara Schley. Hello and welcome to Making Media Now, to Bonnie Waltch and to Sara Schley. And we are here today. It's kind of a special Making Media Now today. As listeners to the podcast are aware, our sponsor is Filmmakers Collaborative. And Filmmakers Collaborative, as is mentioned on every podcast, provides a lot of resources to filmmakers and media makers, but their primary role is to provide fiscal sponsorship for documentary film projects and initiatives. And we're here today to sort of christen and present to the world a very special initiative for a film called Brainstorm the Film. And I'm going to pass the baton to producer Bonnie Waltch to give us a synopsis of what Brainstorm the Film is all about.
Sure, Michael. Thanks so much. And thanks for having us on the podcast. So I'm the producer, director, writer of the film project. And the film is very much inspired by the memoir written by Sara Schley about, and she can talk a little bit more about this, of course, but it was about discovering after 25 years that she is bipolar, has a bipolar brain. And Sara is going to be the co-producer and co-writer of the project. She's really the expert with the experience. And our goal is really to educate the public about the bipolar spectrum, which is very much diagnosed. A lot of people aren't aware that there is a spectrum. They know that there's something called manic depression, which is known as bipolar 1, but they haven't heard of anything else. And they don't realize that there are different types of bipolar brains on a spectrum. And so our goal is to educate the public about this with the intention of saving lives, ending the stigma, providing hope and therapies, and also presenting a lot of really fantastic, smart ambitious people who have bipolar brains and who are doing amazing things and are incredibly creative and accomplished. So Sara can tell you more about her journey, which her book is about.
Thanks very much, Bonnie. And that book is called Brainstorm, and that's Sara's memoir. So Sara, welcome. It's great to be speaking with you.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you for having us.
Tell me about your thought process when the idea was presented to you about turning your memoir into this far-reaching, wide-ranging film initiative.
I'm not sure if Bonnie wants me to share this or not, but I actually approached her. We're old dear friends, and I was blown away in the best sense possible watching Bonnie's film, Climate Emergency, Earth Emergency. In my other life, I've been a sustainability professional for 30 years, and I just thought Bonnie and team knocked it out of the park. So I almost kind of, in jest or with a big hope, mentioned, hey, Bonnie, could we get Brainstorm on PBS? And she said, well, you don't get a film on PBS. What do I know? I don't know anything. Make the best possible film you can, and then, seek to have it distributed on that kind of a channel. So over time, Bonnie invited other folks into this. Melanie Wallace is one who's been an Emmy Award-winning producer who worked for Nova for many years, and Melanie got on board with the project, and here we go.
And Sara, you also have a TED Talk that is very enlightening, very instructive. It's called From Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum, which does a really great job of defining bipolar. First of all, introducing and then defining the bipolar spectrum and how you came to discover that you were on that spectrum and where on that spectrum you were. And you talk about a 25-year journey that involved over 5 psychiatrists. So without replicating the TED Talk, give us a little bit of a synopsis of that journey and how that journey led to the memoir.
Yeah, 25 years is pretty incredible, isn't it? And through our research, we found that on average, it takes someone on the bipolar spectrum 11 years to have the proper diagnosis. And in the interim, they are among the addicted, the incarcerated, the homeless, our friends and family. So missing the diagnosis can be very dangerous. And indeed, those of us anywhere on the bipolar spectrum are twice as likely to take our own lives as anybody with major depression. So getting the diagnosis right is absolutely essential. Why did it take 25 years? So people like myself, we typically show up at a doctor's office of any kind with severe depression symptoms. The ones you're familiar with, low affect, no desire for anything, unable to get out of bed, et cetera, et cetera. And because of those symptoms, we're consistently misdiagnosed as having regular or major depression. Mm-hmm. Because most doctors, most practitioners, even, doctors you would think would specialize in this just are not aware. They haven't been trained to understand that there's a spectrum. So we get the wrong diagnosis, the wrong drugs, which make us worse. And I could go into my whole TED Talk now, but I'll take a breath.
Yeah. And over that journey, that 25-year journey of misdiagnosis and perhaps false starts in terms of medication, what was the increasing difficulty, or was there an increasing difficulty with you navigating, life and work and dealing with this fact of your existence?
Yes. One thing about the bipolar spectrum to note is everyone is different. So my experience is my experience. In my case, severe depressions lasting on average 9 months. Mm-hmm. And when I say severe, completely broken brain, inability to do anything pretty much. So were it not for supportive family and later husband, I could easily be on the streets. So it's a devastating brain pattern that basically, is broken brain. And again, I go in that in detail in the TED Talk, what that means. Choosing between peanut butters, trying to do the laundry. It's impossible to add 2 + 3. You've been very high functioning. And so it's devastating to have this brain that's not working anymore. Interestingly, it got increasingly worse many years later, when I finally, against my constitutional will, said yes to medication. It took me a long time to say yes to medication. I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner. But because I was misdiagnosed, I was given the wrong drugs for me. And antidepressants can actually act like poison for the bipolar brain. Not everyone. Some people do okay with them. But for me, they were made me worse. And so that's part of why the memoir, helping people to recognize they don't have to suffer and they don't have to get worse because of this wrong diagnosis. The good thing, if you will, about being bipolar, some parents of young people have said to me, oh, my kid has a bipolar diagnosis. I would say great, because the good thing about getting the diagnosis is there actually really is good help. Medication actually works for people with bipolar once they're properly diagnosed, and all the other ancillary, treatments that we do.
So when we hear about a spectrum, I think most people get the impression of a spectrum runs from point A to point B. And there's definitions or categories along that spectrum. Can you tell us about what exists along that bipolar spectrum?
I think of it now as a rainbow with infinite stops.
Okay.
That's what we're learning from the researchers. As Bonnie said, we've been talking to the top of the top bipolar researchers and academics. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, I've been saying to them sort of like a wave and a particle. Okay. I'm not sure which the particle is. There are stops along the way. Mm-hmm. Bipolar 2. I have what's known as bipolar 2. That's defined as severe depression plus hypomania. Okay. And we could go into that in more detail. There's also bipolar NOS. NOS means not otherwise specified, which mm-hmm. has some other characteristics to it. What many of the doctors we're speaking to have been saying, over time, we're going to find there's a genetic, everybody's got a slightly different variation on this theme. So there may be a broad swath that says this set of symptoms looks like bipolar 2, like what I have. That's good news. We know that there's certain medications and approaches that can help you. Somewhere else down the line might have something slightly different. But the main thing to appreciate for something on the spectrum, as Bonnie was saying, there's bipolar 1 at the one end of the spectrum that is easy to recognize because it's got that classic mania with a high swing, right? As you go down the spectrum, it's easier to misdiagnose because you don't see the mania. This is bipolar without mania.
Bonnie, as a filmmaker, particularly a filmmaker who concentrates on telling stories about science, when the idea to turn Brainstorm into a film and an initiative was brought to your attention, what were the first questions that came to your mind around how do we take this story? How do we take the science that's inherent in this story and make it visually compelling and make it accessible to people, to lay people?
Yeah, good question. So I just want to back up a little. I did read Sara's memoir probably 2 summers ago. Mm-hmm. I was really blown away by it. It's, Sara is brilliant. She's a fantastic writer. She's someone I knew in college as this, incredibly, accomplished, smart, energetic person. And I was so sort of shocked to hear what she had been through because I didn't know at the time. And so when she approached me and said she wanted to make a film for PBS, at first I didn't think of me doing it. I brought in Melanie Wallace, who's very connected because of her Nova contacts. And I brought her in to consult with Sara. And we talked about maybe getting, who we could get to direct it. And then after having several conversations with Sara, I was so drawn to the content, to the topic. And Sara is so compelling when she talks about it that I just thought, I want to do this. This is right up my alley. Like, I do science films and I'm really, really interested in this story. And I don't think it's a story that's been told. Yeah. And it's something new that people don't know about. And I'm always drawn to stories like that. Like the climate films I did, we focused on feedback loops, which a lot of people don't know about. And I'm very drawn to science topics that the public isn't generally aware of. And I love the challenge of making those stories accessible and telling them well to people. And so this story really drew me. And I thought, I want to do this. This is great. And working with Sara is great. So I guess the way I'm approaching it is I'm fascinated with the science. And so as Sara said, we've been talking to a lot of the top scientists and researchers and doctors in bipolar just to get the lay of the land, to find out what's going on. And we've been learning just incredible stories. Like, for example, perinatal women, which are women in the period of pregnancy and a year postpartum. It turns out there are 20%. They have 20% of them who have no history of bipolar will have a bipolar episode during this period. That's a huge number of women.
It sure is.
And they've never been screened. They weren't even screened for depression until a couple of years ago, generally. I mean, I'm talking kind of generally. And so we talked to this one doctor at UMass Medical who started this program throughout the state of Massachusetts that now 80% of OB practices are using, where they're actually screening women for bipolar and depression. And 19 states have adopted this now. So we're learning all these incredible stories. So I was really drawn to that. And because I love telling science stories, I'm thrilled, to learn all these stories. And there's so many. In fact, we're not just going to do a film. We're going to do a series of deep dive educational videos that go deeper into all these topics because there's so many. And so I have a lot of ideas in mind. We're still doing a lot of research and development and talking to people. So we don't have a treatment yet, but I'm thinking very visually. There are a lot of people who do really cool looking neuroimaging of, they do functional MRIs and you think things lighting up in the brain. So we're going to have a big graphics budget. We're going to do a lot of great graphics, a lot of brain graphics and, really to explain the science well. And we're finding these researchers who have really cool visuals in their own work, like not just the neuroimaging, but they're growing like little brains, and they're creating brains out of stem cells, and there's just all this cool stuff that to me is fascinating as a filmmaker. So I'm very excited to dive into all this content.
And you mentioned your last project, which was climate emergency feedback loops. Would I be overstating it to say that our nation right now is in a bit of a mental health emergency, and therefore the timing of your project could not be more relevant?
I think that's right, Michael. I mean, with COVID and, it is, I think we are in a mental health crisis. And we've been talking to some corporations who have departments that are committed to helping educate their own employees about mental health issues, because there's such a huge problem with workers taking leaves, not being able to come to work, kids obviously having huge problems with school and social interactions. And I just think there's a huge mental health crisis. Sara, you would agree, right?
Yeah. I mean, Michael, circling back again, I think it was one of the key reasons I finally decided to publish this memoir, because I'd written it, in parts 10, 15 years ago. And there's a lot about why I published it when I did in the prologue. So I won't give that away. But I call it the pandemic induced mental health tsunami. And there's no doubt, and then like the Surgeon General last year, maybe now it was 21, came out with the first ever, what would we call this? I can't think, report on mental health disaster among our youth. And 1 out of 2 kids, he's saying that's something around 18 to 25 is suffering from anxiety or depression, 1 out of 2. So if you think about their parents, right? How are their parents getting any work done? So it's really, this tsunami that's infecting all of us, and more we're hearing about it. I mean, then on top of that, we realized that bipolar, probably all mental health challenges, but bipolar in particular, because this is our topic, it is tremendously underreported due to the stigma and due to misdiagnosis. So
let's talk a little bit about that. I'm curious in your experience with being on the bipolar spectrum, how much did portrayals of bipolar characters in pop culture color your perception of the condition and color your perception of yourself as someone who may be living with the condition?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm the person in the street, right? I mean, there's a huge stigma, and I definitely internalized that stigma. And I wasn't telling Bonnie or any of my colleagues at school or at work over the years. I was terrified to, right up until a year ago when I published my memoir. I still was not telling my professional colleagues. I work with, I worked in corporate, private sector. So I had Eileen Fisher as an example, wonderful woman. She was my client for 7 years. She's spoken publicly in the New Yorker and others about mental health challenges in her family. I still was afraid to tell her. I didn't tell any of my colleagues there. I was connected with a network of 300 women CEOs. I wasn't going to tell them. In fact, they're the last people I told. Again, fear of stigma. And I was terrified. I'd feel my heartbeat in my chest, like I was going to die. And then when I finally decided, for whatever reason, put me over, willingness to go public, I just received the most beautiful responses in this last year. It's been tremendously healing. And people saying, me too, or my mother, my sister, my brother, my cousin, my nephew. We've been shocked to find out to a person. We haven't found anyone who doesn't have somebody with bipolar in their family. So how is it that it's only 2%, as statistics say? It's not. We know it's not only 2%.
Bonnie, in the film, what are your initial thoughts right now around how the film will deal with sort of exposing the stigma and kind of disempowering the stigma?
Yeah. Well, we plan to highlight some amazing characters with bipolar, including Sara. We have met the most incredible, accomplished people. We met a Shark Tank millionaire. We met the woman, this doctor who's the former acting surgeon general of California, wrote an op-ed piece in the LA Times in August, coming out saying she's bipolar. We've met an ice climber who worked for the Obama administration. Like, we've just met the most incredible people. So part of our story is to destigmatize it by talking about kind of the silver lining of bipolar, which for people who have it, under control, can be almost like one of our characters calls it her superpower. What enables her to be so creative and so accomplished and so energetic. And so it isn't just, we want to present it as not just this horrible thing that's like a death sentence if you get it. No, it's you learn to control it, and then you can benefit from it, actually.
And Mike,
Sarah, I'm sorry. Go on, Sarah.
Michael, we were Bonnie's talking about these incredible characters, and, even for myself. So there's this huge, I call it shame lifting or shame erasing that's been happening as a result of people writing me and saying, thank you, your courage and vulnerability. It's giving me courage. But I still didn't identify myself with these amazing characters that Bonnie's mentioning. I still identified myself with the downside of bipolar. Now we're meeting all these people and I'm going, oh my gosh, this is my tribe.
Right.
And it's been lifting shame even more and, sort of call it bipolar pride. So that's pretty amazing. So just last week, and we haven't interviewed this person yet, we're excited about, through the various doctors we've been meeting, we always say, who else should we talk to? And one of them said, oh, there's a woman at Cal and she's studying the upside of bipolar, why these people are so much genius, so much creativity. So we're going to talk to her next week because that science is going to be interesting to find out.
When I was listening to your TED Talk, one phrase that kind of resonated with me, and tell me if this was purposeful, was your description of the bipolar brain, which is different than saying I am bipolar, right? And I think there's a difference between saying to somebody, something's happening in your brain that is beyond your control. It's not the byproduct of decisions you've made, as opposed to speaking of the condition as if it were a byproduct of your persona.
I am very intentional about semantics because for me, this is a big part of ending the stigma. And so I say that I use bipolar brain on purpose because I want to say, okay, if you had issues with your lungs or your heart, with your pancreas, would you feel stigmatized? No, you take, insulin. So I do that on purpose. And I also don't like to say I'm bipolar. Well, guess what? I'm also a mom and a friend and a wife and a corporate consultant and a skier. If I say I'm bipolar, I identify myself, you identify me with my disorder. Nope. So I try to be very intentional about the semantics, and it's a little bit controversial. Some of the doctors say, well, it's not just your brain, it's also these other things, and certainly genetics. It may be in your circadian rhythms, but I do it on purpose for that reason. Yeah.
And you had mentioned earlier that I believe it was 11 years on average that it takes for this diagnosis to be delivered. Do you have any sense as the science sort of catches up and as the science evolves, whether that window is shortening?
Well, I can't quote a statistic. I don't really know the answer to that. But what I do know is that it really is, it's coming out more and more. I mean, there's more and more. And that's why I think this project is we have good timing on our side, because just people are coming out more. There's a guy named Paul English, who you might have heard of, who started Kayak, one of the founders of kayak.com.
Yeah.
And he is the one who was behind the development of this MLK Jr. statue that just unveiled in Boston. He started a website called the Bipolar Social Club because he has a bipolar brain, and he wanted to create this community to celebrate people with bipolar brains.
Wow.
He's sort of the poster child of an incredible entrepreneur who's been so successful. So I think things like this are making it more well-known, and more doctors are kind of gradually, the story I told about the OB practices adopting bipolar screening, I think it's trickling out more, but we want this film to really play a big part in that, in educating people, caregivers, doctors, all kinds of audiences about it.
And along those lines, so there's the film, and the film will ostensibly play on PBS at one point. So there's its hour or 90 minutes. But I know that it's really important for you for the film to, live beyond its air date. Right. And for its impact to live beyond its air date. So as a producer, as you're standing right here at its inception, pretty much, tell me where your mind is at with how you want the outreach to basically take on sort of an organic life of its own.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of using the climate films as a model, because we started with 5 short films for the web that we wanted to make accessible to everyone. And then out of that, we created a 1-hour broadcast film that has been airing on PBS and has been sold around the world to various television broadcasters. So for this, we want to do something kind of similar, where we do a film that we hope will be broadcast, whether or not on PBS, we don't know yet. We're hoping. But then we think it's really important to do smaller modules, and we want to get them out somehow. This is what we're trying to figure out. We want to get them to like OBGYNs, primary care physicians who don't get the training that they need. And Sara says something like 80% of prescriptions for Prozac are written by PCPs who have like 1 month of psychiatric training in medical school X number of years ago.
Yeah,
and see a lot of people coming in saying, "Oh, I'm depressed," and writing them Prozac prescriptions, and if you have a bipolar brain, that can lead to suicide. So we want to try to educate PCPs, nurse practitioners, psychiatric nurses, college health centers. We have a huge list of people we want to get these videos to. And what we're thinking about doing is, tailoring each video to a particular audience. So we do like a 20-minute one for OBGYNs. We do a 20-minute one for colleges. We try to really tailor the deep dives to particular audiences and then we have to figure out a way to get them out to them. So we're thinking about that.
Super exciting what Bonnie's saying about these target audiences, because they have slightly different needs. One of the missions of the book and the film will also be to educate people with bipolar and their families, because people don't know. So we have one of my son's best friends at college. As a result of the book, he got the proper diagnosis. Amazing. His mother, my mom, she's from UK. They said they used the book to go to various practitioners who didn't know about bipolar 2 and advocate. And that kind of blows my mind, because exactly what we want to have happen.
Yeah.
And this kid ended up getting the right diagnosis, the right prescriptions. Knock wood, he's on a really good path right now. And hopefully we saved him 25 years of heartache and worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks to Sara's book.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, what better feeling could you have as the author of that book to know that just that one life, and honestly, in the synopsis on the website, which is Brainstorm the Film, for anybody who's interested. And we'll make sure that all of these links and websites are included in the program notes for this particular podcast. But, in the synopsis for your vision for the film, you do use the phrase save lives. And that is not hyperbole. I think that's, the story that Sara just relayed is indicative of that. Bonnie, tell me what how the idea has been received, at least initially, from some of the early stakeholders you might be speaking with.
Really, really positively. I mean, everyone we've talked to is excited about this film. And as Sara said, everyone we talk to says, oh, yeah, my dad had bipolar, my uncle has bipolar, my cousin, my sister, my kid. Like, it's just amazing how many people are touched by this. And I'm just thrilled. I mean, we've been sending out emails about our launch on February 8th, where we were having our meet the team and Q&A session on Zoom. And we've been getting, donations from people we don't even know. We got one nice, very large pledge from someone we do know who has, bipolar in their family. Mm-hmm. So people are just really, this is resonating with a lot of people. So we're getting an incredible outpouring of support. When you
already mentioned a few individuals who I think that I could safely categorize as high achieving. Is there any truth or correlation to the I've heard sort of, anecdotally that a lot of people on the bipolar spectrum are very high achieving. There's a lot of CEOs. There's a lot of very successful entrepreneurs. Sara or Bonnie, what do you know about that? And is that a help or is that a hindrance in trying to make this information applicable to as broad an audience as possible?
Well, Michael, I think the first thing, the hunch that we share from what the description you just had, that's the woman at Cal we're going to be speaking with next week, who's actually doing scientific research into this phenomena. Mm-hmm. So we're really curious to hear what she has to say, because we haven't talked to anyone else who's doing the work. I think, net, it's going to be a positive, because people like me want to see success. We want to see destigma. We want the kids who just gotten that diagnosis and think, is this the end of my life? Oh no, there's Paul English. He sold kayak for 1.8 billion. It's aspirational. Somebody said in a diversity world, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So if you can see it, right, then it's very positive. And I also think it's important. There's a misnomer that somehow if you take lithium or you take some other bipolar med, it's going to hurt your creativity. Mm-hmm. Wrong. I mean, yes, if you take too much, if you're over medicated, or if you've got the wrong drug, or you don't have a good psychopharmacologist, it's possible. But nope, my creativity is improved because I'm not getting sick for 9 months. Yeah. So it's very possible. And I think seeing these other people, one of the ones Bonnie didn't mention, who is now on our team and very passionate about our mission, is Major General Greg Martin, who commanded 10,000 troops in Iraq. So here's another guy, very, very successful. Now that he's medicated, balanced. Yep. Good. I think it's just a positive. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea of those aspirational stories. So, Bonnie, you had mentioned the event on the 8th of February, which Filmmakers Collaborative will be coordinating, and information about that will be shared and publicized highly over the coming weeks. But Bonnie, give us, if you could, just a little bit more about what participants in that Zoom event can expect, and what you would like the outcome of that event to be.
Yeah, well, we're seeing this as sort of our public launch. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have the whole team there, and our team consists of Sara and me, the filmmakers, Melanie, our senior producer. Our advisors are Dr. Holly Schwartz and Dr. Jim Phelps, who are two top bipolar doctors in the field. And then our experience, what are we calling it, Sara? People with lived experience?
Yeah, people with lived experience, or experts. People living with bipolar. Those
right. Or experts by experience, which is also Sara, of course, but is also this former acting Surgeon General, Dr. Devika Bhushan, and Major Greg Martin, who Sara just mentioned, Major General. So they're our official team. So the idea of the event is to meet the team, we'll probably talk a little bit about what we've been telling you about how the project came to be, what our goals are, why we think it's important, and then open the floor for questions if people have questions. So we're really just kind of unveiling it and getting, we want to build a community around the project. And, since we're still in the development phase, we're also open to hearing stories that people might want to tell us. If someone said, hey, there's this great study going on, or there's this cool person I know, like we're open to hearing about it at this point because we're still in the R&D phase.
So given that you are still in the R&D phase, have you even given any thought right now to attaching any type of a timeline to, completion and presenting out in the world the finished product?
We've thought about it. I think probably it might, realistic to say 2024 or 2025. I'm not sure. As you know, films can take many years to make.
Absolutely.
We're very lucky that we've already gotten a nice chunk of funding, and we could go out and film tomorrow if we were ready. But we have a bigger plan. We have a very ambitious plan of not just production of the film, but also the other videos and outreach and, just marketing. And, we have a big goal. So we don't want to rush it. We want to make sure we have really great stories and really great characters. So we're probably thinking about filming kind of late summer, fall, start filming. And then, we'll see. We're learning things all the time. And it's almost like I'm also feeling like the longer you wait, the more there is. Like there's more things happening. And
that was going to be my next question, because as a science filmmaker, as you are, the stories that you tell are they're bolstered by research and by evidence. Right. And it seems like oftentimes you're telling stories that if you waited for the latest to be coming in, you'd never be finished because it's continually evolving. It's
continually evolving. So it's always striking that balance of, not waiting too long, but not rushing it either. And then you're always going to be outdated at some point because science does evolve. So we're trying to balance all that and figure out what the good stories are that won't be outdated 5 minutes later.
Sure. And I think one of the ideal outcomes of your kind of ongoing outreach campaign too would be the opportunity to update information, as it's available and applicable to the subject matter.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to that. Sarah, you were going to say something?
That's pretty much what I was going to say. It was the notion of building community and building a whole field of inquiry and people excited. And, we hope to be the go-to place for the bipolar spectrum for people to learn that what you're saying, Michael, it can be evolving over time. We can, update and add new stories to that.
And we also want to have a multi-platform project where we're not just doing the films, but we're doing, as Sarah said, we're kind of the go-to place. Our website maybe has the latest research. We want to do podcasts, and we might want to do webinars, and we want to keep it open for lots of different approaches.
So I want to leave each of you with a final question. And Sarah, I'm going to start with you. If you could name just one objective that was met at the end of all of this project, what would it be?
The main thing that people learn that there's a bipolar spectrum and there's bipolar without mania.
Wonderful. And Bonnie, yourself?
Yeah, it's the same as Sarah. My goal is to educate people about this topic so they know. That's
fantastic. And I have no doubt that the entire initiative will go a long way toward achieving that objective. As a reminder, the Zoom event will be on February the 8th, and keep your eyes on your social media platforms and your email inboxes, because you'll be receiving information from Filmmakers Collaborative about that. And Bonnie and Sarah, I thank you for your time and for sharing with us information about this really important project. And I look forward to seeing both of you on February the 8th. And Bonnie, did you want to finish up with something?
I wanted to add to encourage people to follow us on social media, because we have Instagram, Twitter, and a Facebook page.
Wonderful.
So can we put the social media links in the program notes?
Absolutely. All of those social media links will be in the podcast notes. And then as we share this podcast, all of those links will also be part of any sharing that's done.
Michael, I just want to add, because people who may be listening to this who are looking for help, resources, right now, they exist on my author page, which is Sara Schley, the way my name is spelled.com. There's a resources page. Really important. If you need help, there are a number of resources there.
That's important. And again, thank you for sharing that. And thank you both for your time. This has been great speaking with each of you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Talk soon.